Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with a couple more Valentine adjacent but not quite Valentine cards that I'm still going to include in my Valentine playlist for this year. Anyway. These cards are also for this week's Color Throwdown Challenge and a very Valentine sort of colors, but again, and I'm going to use like hearts and all the things, but they're not specific Valentine cards, just cuz. So I have shown this technique in the past. I can't even, it's been a long time since I've done it. So you start off with glossy white cardstock. I think you can do this with photo paper because people always ask when I do show it. I've never done it with photo paper, but can't hurt to try. You never know. But it does need to be like glossy white cardstock works the best because it can also handle a little bit more of the layers and the moisture. And then distress oxides. You want to use specifically oxide inks for this. Again, you could try it with other types of inks. You never know. You might get some pretty cool results. But the whole point of this is the oxide inks like kind of sink into the cardstock and the like chalky residue sits on top, but then we get rid of that. And it's super easy to do. And it's kind of cool, especially if you do like very different colors. I'm obviously using very similar colors here. I started with spun sugar. And I'm using it's just a stamp storage sleeve. I'm smushing the inks that way. You can do the standard ink smushing, where you smush it onto a nonstick surface, etc. Using the sleeve like this or a piece of acetate, it just gives you a little more control where you put the inks. The other big thing to remember is to dry in between the layers. If you do not dry between the layers, what is already on the cardstock will start mixing with the next. And again, if you're using like different colors, not just, pinks and reds, you could end up with a very muddy mess. However, when you're doing any sort of ink smushing, if you've never done it before, I recommend sticking to similar colors in the beginning. Just kind of get used to it, have fun with it, and then start getting adventurous with the colors. Because I've had a lot of people comment that about like, oh, mine always turns to mud. Do like a series of pinks like this, or blues, or greens, and just stick to similar colors. You have much better chances because, if they mix together, they're not going to create mud. So with this, it starts looking, the more layers you add, it just, as the colors kind of start fading, absorbing into the cardstock, you'll especially notice it here when I add, because I did spun sugar and then picked raspberry, and then I add lumberjack plaid. And at first it looks fine, but as it dries, it's like the color just fades away. And it's like, what? But that's part of the magic. Now you could always stop here, but I was curious as I was doing this, and I was like, I wonder what would happen if I add gold to this. You could add gold splatter after it's all said and done. That's fine. But I didn't really want it splattery. I kind of wanted it as part of the background. So I took my Gansai Tambi Starry colors. The background's dry. I applied the Starry colors to the sleeve and then just pressed it onto this background. I actually wasn't 100% okay with how it turned out. It ended up being way too much. So next time if I was to do this, I would probably use just less. But I'm still going to work with this because I'm going to die cut it. But yeah, added that to this background, made sure again everything is dry. Don't want wet ink, anything like that. So you want to make sure your background is dry. That's why I was using my heat tool in between the layers. And then the magic of this is just a little bit of microglaze. You can apply this with a blending tool and a foam. That's what I've done in the past. But with this, I just find it's just easier to just take the paper towel, because you need a paper towel just to kind of buff it afterwards anyway. And you buff this into the cardstock and it removes the like chalky residue. And it literally is like magic. It just kind of shows all of those layers you added of inks. And it does also seal it. I don't make a habit of sealing anything I do because I get asked that a lot as well. I don't bother. I ain't got time for it. Tim Holtz always says, don't lick your artwork. But microglaze does seal all of this. So anything you apply on top of this, it is kind of repelled. So you would, if you want to stamp on top of this, you want archival ink, anything like that. You can also use your heat tool, set it, the heat kind of soaks it in. There's ways sort of around it, but again, I just don't bother. However, for this technique, the microglaze is needed. It makes it all shiny and fabulous and fun. So after I'd done all that, buffed it off, I die cut it using Simon's Nested Round Hearts wafer dies. And then set those aside. Pulled out my Misty. I have some Schoolhouse Red cardstock in here. And I have the stamp set that coordinates with those wafer dies. This is the From the Heart Messages stamp set. And this set was designed to go with these hearts. The sentiments are shaped, and there's an outline that you can kind of see there on the backing sheet that shows like what size of wafer die works with what sentiment, which I just thought was really fun. So I have used this set before, it was a couple weeks ago, whenever it was, for one of the blog hops we did for one of Simon's releases. And I just die cut like a bunch of, cardstock with those heart wafer dies. And then I'd stamped on the sentiments on the inside. This time I wanted to stamp sentiments and actually die cut them with these heart wafer dies. So I used some of the sentiments from the set, and I used clear embossing ink. I'd used my anti-static powder tool first. Stamp the sentiments a couple times with clear embossing ink, and then heat emboss them with detail white embossing powder. And then I'm going to die cut them with those coordinating wafer dies. And then off camera, I end up doing a second piece with more sentiments, because I end up with so many hearts from that little fun splattery background I did that I was like, I can definitely get 2 cards out of this. So that's what I'm going to do. So I white heat embossed more sentiments from that set. And there are several in here that are more kind of Valentine-y, love you, my guy, my girl, I love us, etc. But like I said, I went more Valentine adjacent because, yeah, I don't need a whole bunch of Valentine cards. So after I die cut the sentiments, I actually kept the scrap of red cardstock here, put some washi tape on the back of the one little heart, because I wanted to see if I could heat emboss on top of one of the hearts that I did the like magic inking smooshing. I don't even know what you call the technique, but magic ink smooshing, let's call it that, technique. So I put some washi tape on the back of that so it'll hold that little heart in place, and then I'm just going to line up the little XOXO sentiment there. So get everything lined up, and I'm going to get that heart into place. And like I said, because it's been coated with microglaze, it resists ink. You can't really see it in the video, but as I was stamping it, you can literally see the just oxide ink just like beating up onto this. I was fine with that because I'm going to heat emboss it, and I was just testing it out, and I was like, and in the end it works. So, but again, after you've used microglaze on anything, it does literally resist ink. So another option would be to just stamp it with clear embossing ink. That would work probably even better, just because, and then use gold emboss powder. I did think of that, but I was just determined. I was like, I really wanted to use the Lumberjack Plaid Distress embossing glaze because it's just pretty. So that's what I did. I stamped it with the Lumberjack Plaid Oxide ink, heat embossed it, and it was good enough for it to, make it onto the card. So once I was done, funneled the embossing glaze back into the container so I don't knock that over. And then I die cut some scraps of pink cardstock with those same nested round hearts wafer dies. And then I have panels that are going to go onto my card bases. These panels right now are 4 inches by 6 inches because all these elements are big. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make 5 by 7 cards. I don't do 5 by 7 very often. I'm just standard A2 size is just my jam, that's what I'm comfortable with. But every once in a while, it's kind of nice having the bigger space. So I fiddled around with my layout of everything. And then once I was kind of happy with where I was going with all of it, that's when I'm going to start adhering all of these die cut hearts. And I'm just going to use a combination of craft tacky glue. I'm going to use some Big Mama foam tape because this will give them a little bit of dimension, but not a whole lot. And then I also pull out some foam squares. So I've got just different layers of depth and dimension going on here on an otherwise fairly simple, I call these cards kind of simple. Really, the most work was doing the background, and even that didn't take that long before I die cut it and all that. So it was just fun. Fun to kind of ink around and swoosh and die cut and heat emboss and all the things. So I fiddled around again, just figuring out where I wanted to lay out these pieces, obviously wanting to use pretty much all of the pieces I die cut from the background I created at the beginning. And then the ones that I had heat embossed and die cut, I popped up with little foam squares. So they're popped up a little bit higher. Again, just gives it that little bit of dimension. and letting a little bit here and there kind of hang over the edges. Because again, these panels are going to go onto 5x7 cards. So I know I have a lot of leeway with everything. So I just sat down and just adhered, you know, tried not to overthink it too much, and had a little blast doing all this. And then the whole time I was doing this, I was thinking, I was like, this needs gold glitter. So of course, I have some die cut gold glitter cardstock. I die cut some scraps with more of those nested round hearts. So I die cut some of that from gold glitter cardstock and adhered those. And then I also pulled out the Mini Hearts Party wafer die set. And I had extras in the packaging. I've shown this in a bunch of videos. I just keep with little hearts and any basic shapes. I just keep all those die cuts with the packaging. And funny enough, the gold glitter previous die cut hearts didn't match. So I pulled out more scraps of the same gold glitter cardstock that I used for the other hearts and just used those as little filler, you know, little embellishments. So adhered those into place onto these panels. So I've just got all these different sizes of hearts in different colors of cards. Like, you know, I got pink and the red, and then the smushed magic inked background ones, and then the gold glitter. So then I've got to create my card bases. So to make 5x7 card bases, I trim my cardstock down to 10 inches by 7 inches. And I'm just using my big guillotine trimmer here for this. So, and then as always, keeping those extra scraps, I use those for sentiment strips, die cutting, all the things. So after I've trimmed the cardstock to 10 inches by 7 inches, I am going to score it at 5 inches with my Teflon bone folder and my score buddy. And because it's just slightly too big for my little score buddy, I just flip it around, score it again at 5 inches, and then reinforce that fold with just the side of my bone folder. And then repeat the process for the second piece. So I've got two 5x7 card bases here. So after I had my card bases made, I, you know, kind of sat and stared at it for a bit as I had the card front panels sitting on top of both of these card bases. And I was like, you know, they didn't feel fully finished. I was like, I could pop these up with a little bit of foam tape, you know, give it a bit of dimension. Because it was like, no, you know, no. Decided to just cut down a couple pieces of that same Schoolhouse Red cardstock to slightly larger. So it was like 4 1/4 by 6 1/4, something like that. Just slightly bigger. So it just mats it nicely, gives it a little bit of a frame, finishes it off. So then after I had matted that, I could adhere it to the card fronts. So then I've got, you know, just a nice size, and then the actual little panels framed by that red cardstock just gives it that little extra something. So after I done that, I still have other hearts that I had heat embossed, as well as the die cut ones. And because these are 5x7 cards, I always feel like I can go a little overboard with what I add to the inside because there's just so much more room. There's so much more room for activities. Bonus points if someone gets that reference. Anyway, I adhered my large die cut sentiments onto the insides because, again, why not? You know, there's space for it. So adhered all of that along with just some of the extra die cut hearts just to tie it all together. As always, a person could leave it here, but after I had done the gold glitter hearts, I was like, it still needs bling. So I'm using some Studio Caudia Wineberry Pearls. They're just kind of the perfect shade of red for this. And just kind of put a few here and there to kind of fill in some of the blank spaces. But like I said, you could always skip this, but I've got the lifetime's worth of bling, so why not use them? So once I was kind of happy with the placement, I am just going to adhere these into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue. I was using my embellishment wand to pick them up and put them into place. I was also using the embellishment wand earlier just to pick up some of those smaller die cuts and adhere those into place. It just makes life so much easier. Once these are adhered, I'm going to pair these with some 5x7 envelopes, and that finished off these cards. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. In the blog post, I will link to the color throwdown challenge because you guys can check it out for inspiration, play along if you'd like. It's open to everybody. We just do it for fun. And then of course I will link to all of the supplies I used. So I will have a supply list linked directly below the video. I'll also have it in picture links over on my blog, so you can check that out if you are interested. Thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping and commenting. It really, really helps. It helps the robot overlords and the algorithms and all the things, and I very much appreciate it. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!